Hi, class. Happy Monday. This week I am co-leading the presentation for Grasshopper Jungle with MaryEllen. She's handling the content this week, and I'm handling the reception. So I think we both kind of had sort of drawn the fun straw with this one. This is definitely like a love it or leave it kind of title, and I am more on the love it side of things. Um, and yeah, this has been a very interesting project to kind of dig in and get different people's perspectives and things. So before we get into the presentation, just my initial reaction, my first time reading it through, I loved it. Really reminded me of Slaughterhouse Five. Maybe even more so, Cat's Cradle. I've seen Slaughterhouse Five from Kurt Vonnegut as a very common comparison. Cat's Cradle is also written in sort of a very sort of jumpy narrative style and dealt with post-apocalyptic themes as well as kind of having a historical perspective because it was obviously written by the survivors of this apocalypse and was also brought about by well-meaning military scientists, relatively well-meaning military scientists. And in Cat's Cradle was Ice Nine, if you ever hear that term. Ice Nine was a fun little device in that froze the all water, just crystallized. So anyway, you can tell that I love tangent. So like Grasshopper Jungle was definitely a title for me. Having said that, most of the reviews are extremely positive, maybe surprisingly positive for this title, given the crude nature, the fact that it is geared towards a YA audience. It has some issues, maybe with representation, as well as character development, that we'll get into a bit later. Uh, but overall received extremely well. And it seems to be one of those titles that maybe the people that don't like it so much just aren't being as vocal as the people that are vehemently sort of behind this book. So anyway, I thought this was a really fun title to kind of dig into. So let's hop over into the presentation and yeah, I have some questions that I'll be leaving everybody with at the end and hoping that you make it through there. I'll post them in the chat as well. So here we go. So okay, Grasshopper Jungle. Andrew A. Smith. MaryEllen is already posted her presentation, and we talked earlier in the week, and I know she goes into a lot of really good detail about sort of the history and development of this title and how this was maybe never even supposed to see the day of light. So I thought that was very interesting as well. Um, so welcome to Grasshopper Jungle. My name's Jim O'Connor, one of your fellow classmates here, obviously. And yeah, so just right off the bat, I think the color scheme of this book is one thing that like it caused people to have a sort of a visceral reaction to this book. They either love the color or they do not like it. And as some reviewers have mentioned, even the yellowed, sort of intentionally yellowed sides of the paper add to the sort of faux historical element to it. But maybe that doesn't really work for you, and it also sort of implies a sort of a false veneer of Austen's historical correctness and his role as a unreliable narrator through this title, which um, that unreliability is something that also drained on some critics as well, in the way that it was maybe carried through. But again, resoundingly positive reviews mostly for this. So, Grasshopper Jungle is a Marmite book. You'll either love it or hate it. This is by the Guardian. Um, like Vegemite, Marmite is a food spread made from brewer's yeast, and some people really like it. Marmite was invented by Justus von Liebig. Justus von Liebig is known as the father of the fertilizer industry for also inventing nitrogen-based fertilizers. He noticed the role that nitrogen played in this process and is a luminary in the field. German-born scientist. He saw that nitrogen is, maybe most important when you're growing corn. And without Justus von Liebig, the scientists of Ealing, Iowa, and McKeating Industries could not have invented their unstoppable corn, Invictus Fermentum. In Grasshopper Jungle, all historical roads cross. You know what I mean. So, not surprisingly, extra information like that might not be everybody's everybody's bag when you're reading stories, and some people really enjoy it. So, the critical reception to me again was surprisingly positive. the things that most people did take issue with were things like the narrative device, maybe again character development, possibly Austin's role in sort of just kind of using the people around him and being sort of an ineffective protagonist, and maybe one that didn't learn anything by the end of the book either, which seemed to bother people. But I honestly thought there was going to be more pushback on, again, the crude, somewhat crude nature of it. Maybe that's just me, sort of overprotecting young adults in a way, and just thinking, that most things like this aren't going to fly for people. But a lot of critics actually praised this sort of clinical way in which uh, Austin approached things like his first, first and maybe only like sexual interaction action with Shan. He approached it in a very, again, sort of historical basis. He stayed relatively detached. It wasn't overly gratuitous, and that was something that a lot of people actually praised. It was like, oh, it can deal with these difficult topics, but it's doing it in a way that, isn't maybe just being toxic for the sake of being toxic. Having said that, not everybody agrees with that, but yeah, Common Sense Media is a coming of age novel, compellingly bizarre, and likens it to Vonnegut, Kafka, and for similar authors. And MaryEllen does a really good job of picking up on the content and likening that to a lot of these similar authors. I think it's like one of those things where good artists borrow and great artists steal, and Andrew Smith definitely took a lot here and made it his own in a way that really resonated with people. So The Guardians is without a doubt, this is the weirdest book I've ever read. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but again, it's really not for everyone. Um, there's questions on, again, later, like, would you even hand this to a child, like, would you, or a young adult? Let alone have it in your, display or something like that. Again, my feeling is maybe yes to the second and maybe no to the first on that one. School Library Journal says, I've never been so conflicted about a book ever. And then that was the title of their article, and it's AKA a book review of Grasshopper Jungle. The book smuggler loved this book, but started off with saying, I am sorry, but this is a difficult review to write. And this is one of the reasons why I thought this was going to be so fun, because their thoughts definitely were all over the place. So I definitely recommend checking out those reviews. I'm gonna link to all of these in my references at the end, so you'll be able to have those, and I'll share the PowerPoint in the chat as well. Just critical reception by the numbers. Goodreads, overall pretty strong score. Again, it's kind of a love it or leave it title, so this was, um, there were definitely some 1 and 2 star ratings that I felt like had a lot of merit. I get a little bit more into those in the issues section. But yeah, Common Sense Media, Amazon, Book Smugglers, all super high ratings here, and yeah, School Library Journal. It was kind of the most like sort of mixed review. Teen reception. I did my best to try to find teen or recently teen, kind of young adults, and their opinions. These are three particular YouTube videos that I thought were very well rounded. Again, most of the people I feel like are speaking out about this particular title are ones that have a real vested interest in sharing this with other people. So it's like, oh, this is so weird, but you might not like it, kind of a thing, which is almost sort of a fun teen way of going, like, oh yeah, it's not for everybody, and just sort of making it a bit of an elitist thing. But really, a lot of people are into this book, honestly, for the joy of reading it, as well as I think sort of enjoying something that's just so quirky and weird on its face. Get Bookish really goes into more of a nuanced review here. Our reviewer at the top, more of a nuanced review on the actual character development, and questioning Austin's value as an actual character, as well as Robbie and Shan in particular. Just are they relatively flat characters? Could there have been more development? Was that good representation for gay people, as Robbie? Was Robbie good representation essentially, or was that maybe counterproductive? because he was so accommodating in some ways to Austin. Um, and then yeah, Michael Reed's is the YouTube channel name. This book is hilarious, but again, not for everyone. And Dylan at the bottom was maybe one of the most like resoundingly positive. Like I loved this, and this really spoke to me and did something for me as a person. It told me this was okay to kind of be and do and question, and love the historical jumpy take for all that. So either great or grating. Independent bloggers. Again, I'm kind of intentionally sort of looked at some poor reviews, and honestly, they say a lot of the same things that the good reviews say. It's just again whether that worked for you or not. But one reviewer in particular, and I have a question about this at the end, was just like, was Smith being intentionally edgy? Was he just being desperate to be edgy? And whether that worked for you or not. So the fact that when you pull up any given page, there's 20 different expletives, and he probably says the word balls and horny at least 10 times. Like, was that being authentic maybe to how it is growing up as a sexually questioning particularly young man, um, or was that again just sort of being in your face, and maybe given I'll kind of camp this and play my hand a little bit, but maybe given the fact that he didn't intend on publishing this, should also give you some insight into whether he was being intentionally edgy to just get attention or not. Dark Matterzine really picked up on more of the sort of sci-fi elements that let you philosophize, as well as sort of explore your own sort of being and ontology, and in this case, mostly through sexuality, and really does warn a reader to be patient. That this book does circles, and that when it comes back, you start like Andrew, not like Andrew, like the author, I guess, as well. But like Austin, you end up seeing the connections everywhere and where all these roads intercross. Monica from Monty Blog says, I'm still undecided about how I feel about this book. They ended up giving it a quite a high rating, I believe. But the sci-fi elements, they say, really, and maybe this is just kind of like pointing out the obvious, but they say the sci-fi elements really are just a backdrop to this Bildungsroman. So like it's just sort of like a journey that a person goes through in like character development, right? And I think that's pretty obvious that that's in at least in some ways at play um in Grasshopper Jungle, but I'll again kind of question whether Austin really did develop as a character or not. Like when we see him at the end, did he just sort of get everything he wanted, or like, and the world adjusted to him, which is maybe more fantasy sort of in a way than like picking up on some of the sci-fi elements. Was that unrealistic? Even camped in a world of giant praying mantises and things of that nature. Was it too unrealistic that Austin just sort of got everything? Or did he actually, was it in fact that he went on a journey and did develop? I think these are kind of interesting questions to sort of ask, and especially when you go through on a second read, I have to say personally, I did not enjoy it as much on my second and kind of third time engaging with this title. It did begin to grate on me a little bit, but I felt extremely rewarded by my first read. And this was one of the first reads when Dr. Aronson shared out um, our reading list over the winter break. And knowing that this is one of the longer titles and that I was going to present on it, I got on this first, and it was just absolutely bizarre and sort of set the tone for the rest of the class for me in a fun way. So, issues with this title. This is my last actual slide before the references. Again, despite the mostly positive reviews, some common issues kept coming up, and I'm just curious if you, as a class, maybe feel the same. So, again, with Robbie and Shan, flat characters. I'll kind of just go maybe left to right around this and talk about these a bit more. So, like, was Robbie and Shan, were they genuinely flat characters? Do you agree? Some people really did feel differently. Some reviewers felt that Robbie in particular was very well fleshed out and provided great representation, and others really didn't. So I'm just curious how that landed with you, as an individual and as a class, kind of overall. Some people questioned whether this really is even a YA book, and this is kind of continuing some of our thoughts and readings from like the first couple of weeks, and do people write YA for adults or not? Um, who gets to say what is a book for a young adult or not? Andrew Smith, I'll say again, just kind of harkening back, wrote this book essentially for himself, and now this is sold as a YA title. So just putting that out there, like how did this start? Is it a YA title now, or did it start that way? I think there's a lot to kind of dig into there. And speaking of, was the repetition too much for you to handle? Did that get on you? How did you feel about that as a narrative element? Um, I personally find most of those instances fairly comical when he unnecessarily says somebody's name several times over again. Not to influence your decision in this, but I know many people in my life that do not find that kind of thing funny, and for some reason, I've always just thought that's hilarious when people unnecessarily do that. And again, I asked this kind of earlier, but would you ever recommend this book to a young adult? I know some people that have said, they give it great reviews, and they said I would absolutely not hand this to a child or a young adult, or the suggested age range is 14 and up. And they said no, I wouldn't hand this to anybody under 18, but I would certainly include this in part of my collection. And I feel like that's mostly where I'm at personally. Um, so, would this have a place in your school library? I've just kind of answered that for myself, but I'm curious how you would feel about this. And yeah, so again, there's a bigger question. This kind of goes back to maybe Robbie and Shan as being flat characters, but how do you feel about Smith's representation of other races and women? Particularly, there was the Asian cook. Um, Lewis or Wong. And so, like, how do you feel about him as a character? Maybe was again other some reviews felt oh, that was they provided a fair amount of backstory through a lot of Smith's tangents, and other people again felt like maybe they were just sort of being stereotyped in a way. And then we asked this question earlier, but the last question was Smith being intentionally edgy? And if so, did this fall flat for you? Um, again, not to answer all of these, but on personally on my read, my first one, this did not really fall flat for me. But again, on the second and third time through, a lot of that was ended up going from great to grading on my own read. So, but I'm really looking forward to hearing everybody in the class's thoughts on these questions and other issues that you might have in the title. And then I'll just leave you with my references here, and then so this is two pages, and I'm not sure why the screen flickered like that. But yeah, so I appreciate everybody's time, and I'm looking forward to the discussion. Thank you very much. Have a great day.